Today is World Read Aloud Day. The day is about encouraging the culture of visiting libraries and reading. For more, let's bring Professor Mary Metcalfe from the University of Johannesburg School of Public Management. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thanks for your time on the SABC at this hour.
Thank you.
Prof, let's just shine a spotlight on the importance of reading aloud, sharing stories, and why it is so beneficial for children.
You know, reading is something that people who have grown up in schools and in families where reading is part of everyday activities don't fully grasp the impact for the majority of children who may grow up in families where books are not part of the daily ritual, where the only time that they really engage reading is when they are in school. Now, if a learner does not learn to read for pleasure, doesn't gain enough fundamental skill in reading to be able to read not only to get meaning, to get pleasure, but also to learn. Because especially from grade 4, the most important vehicle of children's acquisition of knowledge and understanding is through reading. So reading for pleasure, with enough books at school that can be read at school, that can be taken home to be read, is something that would make a huge difference to our education performance and to reducing some of the inequalities in the system.
Mary, from your vantage point, is reading aloud endangered, or is it beginning to thrive again in a South African context? What are you observing?
Reading aloud is something that is necessary and depends on other factors. It depends on whether or not the school has enough books. Whether or not the school has enough books depends on the support that comes from the province. We know that our learners are not reading at the levels we would like them to. The simple rule for me is a child learns to read by reading, obviously facilitated by good educators and committed educators. But the more children are able to access books, to find pleasure in reading, some people reading aloud to them reading aloud to others. And by the way, I came across a wonderful example of how you can do this quite simply at a school in the Western Cape. You have the grade 4 readers reading to the grade 1 learners. You have the grade 2 learners reading to the grade 5 learners, just one-on-one. It can be fun, it can be social, but it also provides more opportunities for learners to be heard. Our foundation phase classes are large. Teachers struggle to be able to listen to every child reading. Families can do so much more. For a mother, a father, an older brother, a sister, an aunt to say, let me hear that lovely story that you're reading. Not to make it didactic, but to make it for pleasure. To read the book to the child, to get the child to read to you. There's so much we could do.
Mary, we're looking at ways to address the literacy crisis in South Africa ahead of SONA. The fact that it is also an election year, beyond what you've just alluded to, what else needs to be done in terms of interventions and support from an ECD level?
Okay. Well, what we have now is grade R will be compulsory, so children coming into the education system should, as we implement that policy with the available resources, we should be improving the background fundamentals that children come into the system with. What I would love the SONA to address is the urgency of improving reading and mathematics, and improving reading and mathematics beyond a slogan, but with very careful planning. Why that's important in this year's SONA is because we also know that as a country, because we haven't had the economic growth that we had hoped for, we have greater fiscal constraints. I would love to see the President saying, within our fiscal constraints, let's prioritize carefully what matters, and what matters is supporting and planning for improved reading and maths right from the foundation phase, because that will have a huge impact on how well learners do in the system and I believe it would reduce dropout. It would give greater confidence and sense of success and achievement to many of our learners.
We're looking at the effects that triple threats of poverty, unemployment and inequality has had in South Africa 30 years into democracy. And I wonder if we are going to begin to address some of the issues, how the role of South Africa's political economy also needs to be repositioned or questioned, just as we look at the gaps, but also the strides that have been taken.
Yeah, so the question of economic growth is something that really does require the president to move beyond some of the things that he said last year, to reflect on progress, but also identify those key instruments that will assist us in addressing what has in fact been a real failure to meet our targets. We set ourselves targets that we hope to achieve in 2030, but we haven't achieved the GDP growth. The target for achievement by 2030 was about 5.5% GDP growth, but we've only achieved about 1%. What needs to be done within the economy that will facilitate a more rapid acceleration to achieving our GDP growth will therefore also have an effect on reducing unemployment and reducing the massive inequities. Education and training is part of that, because the education and training system is part of building the solid social base of access to the human rights, and also should be providing the country with an active citizenry who is engaged, who is contributing, and who is developing the skills that will build the economy and build our societies.
Absolutely, Prof. We're going to leave that conversation there. Professor Mary Metcalfe from the University of Johannesburg School of Public Management weighing in. We're shining a spotlight at World Read Aloud Day. Also extended to that conversation, we're looking at the state of South Africa's education, some of the gaps, the strides that have been taken, and really where to from here in anticipation of the State of the Nation address and elections for South Africa this coming year.